The quiet always came first, like a warning Emily Carter never asked for, settling into the corners of her Vermont home as the sun slipped behind the trees, and on that Sunday evening it felt heavier than usual, pressing against her chest as she stood by the kitchen window, watching her reflection blur with the fading light, thinking about how life had narrowed into routines she followed without question: work, groceries, polite smiles, sleep, ever since her husband died 3 years earlier. Leaving behind love but also a silence that refused to leave. Emily was 46, still warm in spirit, still capable of joy, but grief had taught her to keep her feelings folded away, neat and untouched, and most days she convinced herself that was enough, until the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the stillness and reminded her that Lucas was home, her son, tall now, confident, carrying the restless energy of someone who had tasted freedom and returned with opinions and plans. Lucas entered the house like a breeze, dropping his bag, filling the air with talk about college, friends, and ideas that moved too fast for Emily to follow, and she listened with a smile that was real but tired, noticing how her son studied her between sentences, how his eyes lingered on her pauses, on the way she seemed to shrink into the background of her own home. Dinner passed quickly, conversation bouncing, but underneath it Lucas felt a quiet concern he couldn't ignore, because he had watched his mother grow smaller over the years, not weaker, but quieter, as if she had decided that loving deeply once was enough for a lifetime. And while Emily cleared the dishes, Lucas leaned against the counter and spoke before he lost the nerve, telling her that the house felt too still, that she deserved more than memories and polite grief, and Emily laughed softly, brushing it aside with a practiced calm, saying she was fine, that life was peaceful. But Lucas didn't back down, his voice steady as he said peace wasn't the same as living, and for a moment Emily felt something crack, not anger, not fear, but surprise, because no one had spoken to her that honestly in a long time. She turned away, pretending to focus on the sink, while Lucas continued, careful but direct, telling her he worried when she stopped meeting friends, when she avoided invitations, when her world shrank to the size of responsibility and routine, and Emily finally asked him to stop, her voice firm but trembling, because she wasn't ready to examine the truth in his words. The room felt quiet again, heavier now, and Lucas apologized quickly, saying he didn't mean to upset her, only that he loved her, and Emily nodded, accepting the apology, yet her heart beat too fast as she realized how clearly her son saw her, how little she had managed to hide. Later that night, Emily sat alone in the living room, the lamp casting a soft glow over old furniture and framed photographs, and she picked up one of them, a picture of her and her husband smiling without effort, remembering how love once felt natural and easy, not something she had to protect herself from. And as she stared at the image, Lucas's words echoed in her mind, stirring emotions she had carefully set aside. She told herself that her son was young, that he didn't understand how fragile hope could be after loss, yet she couldn't deny that part of her missed being seen not as a survivor, not as a mother alone, but as a woman still capable of connection. Upstairs, Lucas lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had said too much, knowing he had crossed into territory that felt dangerous, because parents were supposed to protect children, not the other way around. But he also knew silence had done nothing but let sadness settle deeper into the walls of that house. Emily eventually turned off the lamp and climbed the stairs, moving through the hallway like someone walking through memory, pausing outside Lucas's door before continuing on, her thoughts tangled, her emotions unsettled, because in one short conversation, her son had shifted something inside her, not by force, but by honesty. And as she lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of the house, she understood that the quiet she had grown used to was no longer peaceful, it was waiting, and she sensed that whatever came next, whether she wanted it or not, would begin with that moment, when her son crossed a line not out of disrespect, but out of love, changing the shape of their lives before either of them fully understood how. A few days after that uneasy Sunday, Emily woke to find an envelope resting on the kitchen table, stark and simple, her name written in a handwriting that made her pause, a mix of curiosity and hesitation knotting her stomach. She picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hands as if it might bite, and when she finally opened it, she found a short, delicate note that read like a whisper meant only for her: "You deserve more than quiet evenings and old memories. Someone sees you." Her hand shook slightly, and her first thought was that it must be a mistake. But the handwriting was familiar, neat and careful. Daniel Brooks, her neighbor, widower, the man she had known for years as polite, distant, always kind in small ways, offering help with groceries, lending tools, exchanging greetings over fences, someone who had never crossed the boundary of friendship, yet somehow now had reached through it with this unexpected, gentle message. Emily felt a swirl of emotions: surprise, warmth, hesitation, and a subtle guilt for feeling anything beyond simple gratitude. And immediately her mind went to Lucas, wondering if he had noticed the envelope before she did, or if he had somehow encouraged it. But there was no sign of him, only the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of the leaves outside. and she realized she had to confront her son, her voice carrying a sharp edge of worry and mild accusation as she found him sprawled on the couch, earbuds in. Scrolling aimlessly through his phone. "Lucas," she said, and he jumped slightly, startled, but the moment their eyes met, he knew what was coming. She held up the envelope, and he froze, guilt written across his young face, as if he had known all along she would find it. "You had no right," she said firmly, though her words trembled slightly, because part of her couldn't deny a flicker of curiosity, a spark of excitement at the thought that someone was noticing her, someone outside the walls of grief and routine. And Lucas, calm but earnest, met her gaze and admitted, "I know I crossed a line, Mom. But watching you disappear into sadness, it hurt more than the risk of you being mad at me." Emily turned away, unsure whether to be angry, moved, or fearful of the emotions stirring inside her. She felt her heart pound as she realized she hadn't been truly seen in years, not really, not since before her husband's passing, and this envelope, simple as it was, carried the weight of recognition and care, something she had almost forgotten could exist. That night, she sat in the quiet of her room, the envelope on the table beside her, studying Daniel's note again, letting the words sink in slowly, tasting the warmth and possibility in them, realizing that he wasn't bold or forward, he was cautious, careful, respectful, but undeniably interested, and Emily felt a flutter of something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope, tinged with uncertainty, a longing for companionship and laughter and the small joys that grief had stolen. Yet even as she considered it, she worried about Lucas, about how much he had seen, how much he had influenced, how much he cared, and the knowledge that her son had stepped into this delicate territory for her sake both unsettled and comforted her, leaving her mind spinning with conflicting thoughts and emotions. Over the next few days, Emily noticed Daniel more than usual, catching glimpses of him tending his garden, or taking his evening walk, each sight filling her chest with a mixture of anticipation and fear, while Lucas watched silently from a distance, observing both of them with the quiet intensity of someone protecting the person he loved most, knowing he had nudged events forward, knowing he had played a part in opening a door that might lead to happiness, yet uncertain if his interference would be welcomed or resented. Emily debated what to do, going over the envelope in her mind, reading the note repeatedly, feeling both the urge to respond and the fear of misstep, and when she finally decided to write back, her hand trembled as she formed the words carefully, expressing gratitude, curiosity, and a cautious willingness to meet, aware that this small act could alter the rhythm of her life entirely. When she delivered her response the next morning, she felt a nervous thrill, a sensation she hadn't allowed herself in years, like stepping onto a stage where the outcome was unknown, exhilarating, dangerous, and full of possibility. Lucas, sensing the shift in his mother, kept his distance, giving her space while secretly counting the moments until he would see her again, worried she might regret this step, worried he had pushed too far, yet unable to deny the relief he felt seeing her consider a life beyond grief. Daniel's reply came quickly, warm, careful, with a suggestion of coffee at the small cafe down the street, casual enough to be safe, intimate enough to promise a beginning, and Emily felt a wave of courage mixed with hesitation, knowing she would have to leave the comfort of familiar solitude, knowing she would have to risk disappointment, but also sensing that the simple act of meeting Daniel might remind her of what it felt like to be truly noticed, truly desired, without shame or fear. The day of the meeting, Emily dressed slowly, choosing a simple dress, brushing her hair carefully, and feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness, emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, while Lucas hovered in the hallway, pretending to be distracted by his phone, secretly hoping she would find joy, hoping the path he had nudged her onto would lead somewhere gentle and kind. And as she walked out the door, the envelope tucked safely in her purse, Emily realized that life was moving forward whether she wanted it to or not, that love might return in forms she never expected, and that her son's unexpected boldness, his willingness to cross a line to protect her heart, had opened the first door to a new chapter she had been too afraid to enter, leaving her heart fluttering with anticipation, worry, and the strange, thrilling promise that maybe, just maybe, happiness was still waiting for her. Emily arrived at the cafe feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation, the crisp morning air brushing against her face as she approached the small, sunlit building where Daniel was already waiting, seated at a corner table with a gentle smile that made her heart skip in a way she hadn't felt in years, and for a moment, she hesitated at the door, wondering if she was doing the right thing, if she was ready to open herself to someone again. But the memory of Lucas's encouragement and the note she had received pushed her forward, and as she stepped inside, Daniel stood, offering a polite nod that quickly turned into an easy, warm greeting, and Emily felt a spark of comfort immediately, the kind that comes from knowing someone sees you without pretense, without pressure, just genuine attention. They ordered coffee, and conversation began slowly. Stilted at first, with polite inquiries about life, the neighborhood, shared memories of past events, but soon the words began to flow naturally, touching on grief, the challenges of moving forward, the small joys of routine, and the quiet hopes that had been tucked away for too long, and Emily realized that she could talk to Daniel without fear of judgment, without having to hide her sadness or her longing, and that felt like freedom. Outside, the street buzzed with life, children laughing on their way to school, shopkeepers arranging displays, the ordinary world moving in its normal rhythm, while inside, Emily felt as if time had slowed, allowing her to breathe, to feel, to connect in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. As they talked, Daniel shared gentle stories about his own losses, the lessons he had learned about patience and resilience, and Emily felt her heart soften further, recognizing in him a kindred spirit, someone who understood sorrow but also believed in the possibility of joy, and she laughed at a small joke he made, a sound that surprised her because it was light, easy, natural, and for the first time in a long while, she felt seen not as a mother or a widow, but as Emily, a woman with feelings and desires and the right to be happy. Across town, Lucas waited anxiously, pacing his room, checking his phone as if by monitoring the clock he could measure the unfolding of events, feeling the tension of uncertainty and hope intertwined, knowing he had started this chain of events by gently nudging his mother, worrying that perhaps he had interfered too much, but unable to deny the relief and pride he felt seeing her take a step forward into the world again. And as the morning stretched into afternoon, he felt a tentative peace knowing that his mother's heart might be opening, even if slowly. Meanwhile, Emily and Daniel left the cafe, walking side by side down the quiet streets, their conversation turning lighter, filled with shared observations about the town, small jokes, reflections on favorite books and movies, and Emily noticed how easy it was to be around him, how comfortable, how safe, how unthreatening the connection felt, a sharp contrast to the long years of isolation and grief she had endured, and yet beneath the ease was a tender, subtle pull, an unspoken understanding that this could grow into something meaningful if given the chance, and she felt her heart flutter with cautious excitement, aware of how unfamiliar and thrilling this sensation was after so long. As they paused at a small park to watch children play, Emily realized she was smiling genuinely, a warmth spreading through her chest she hadn't felt in years, while Daniel's presence beside her was steady, grounding, encouraging without words, and she noticed herself leaning slightly toward him, a silent acknowledgement of trust and curiosity. That evening, Emily returned home to find Lucas waiting, trying to mask his curiosity with casual conversation, but his eyes betrayed him, wide with anticipation and worry, and as she sat down her bag and removed her coat, he asked gently, "So, how was it?" And Emily hesitated, realizing the weight of her answer, knowing it could shift dynamics at home, and yet she smiled softly, a real, open smile, and said, "It was nice. Very nice." Lucas exhaled, relief flooding his features, and she caught the quiet pride and worry mingling there, understanding that he had acted from love, from concern, and even though his approach had been bold, it had not been reckless, and it had opened her heart in a way nothing else had. Over the next days, Emily noticed subtle changes in herself. She walked with more ease, laughed more freely, noticed the sunrise and the small joys she had overlooked for years, and while she continued her routines, there was a brightness underneath, a spark that reminded her that life could feel tender, romantic, and hopeful again. And Lucas watched this transformation with a mixture of satisfaction and humility, knowing he had done something risky but right, and feeling gratitude that his mother's heart was rediscovering its capacity to feel, to hope, to love. As Emily and Daniel met repeatedly over the weeks, sharing coffee, walks, and quiet conversations, she became aware of the delicate rhythm forming between them, a dance of trust, attraction, and careful patience, where neither rushed, both listened, both respected the slow unfolding of emotions, and Emily felt a sense of safety she hadn't known since before her loss, realizing that love could be gentle, respectful, and profound, and that happiness could arrive quietly, without fanfare, through small gestures, kind words, and shared presence. One evening, she overheard Lucas on the phone in the living room, voice low and sincere, telling a friend how he had wanted his mother to feel loved again, even if it meant risking her anger or misunderstanding. And Emily paused in the hallway, tears welling, struck by the depth of his care, the courage it took to intervene subtly in her life, and the clarity that the line he had crossed was not selfish, but born of devotion and concern. And she realized that love existed in many forms, not only romantic, but familial, protective, selfless, and that sometimes those forms intersected in ways that could feel complicated but ultimately beautiful. That night, Emily lay in bed reflecting on the day, on the subtle shifts in her heart, on the warmth and attention she felt from Daniel, and the quiet pride and love she felt for Lucas, understanding that the events unfolding were the beginning of something tender, emotional, and transformative. And while she didn't know what the future held, she recognized that the first steps had been taken toward healing, toward connection, toward rediscovering her capacity for joy, and she finally felt a gentle thrill of hope, a promise that life could be rich with emotion, love, and gentle romance once more, all because her son had dared to care enough to cross a line, and she had dared to open her heart, even if cautiously, to what was possible. Autumn had settled over Vermont, painting the trees in fiery shades of red and gold, and Emily decided it was time to bring Lucas and Daniel together in the same room, a step she knew could change everything, a step that filled her with nervous anticipation and careful hope, because she wanted to show both of them that life could hold warmth and connection without fear or misunderstanding. She prepared dinner with deliberate care, choosing dishes that were simple yet comforting, arranging the table with small candles and fresh flowers, creating a space that felt inviting, soft, and intimate, a place where honesty could breathe easily. And when Lucas arrived first, his energy was a mix of curiosity, caution, and pride, quietly observing his mother's efforts, noting the subtle confidence in her movements, the brightness in her eyes that had returned after weeks of hesitant meetings with Daniel, and he realized that she had changed in ways he had only hoped to inspire. When Daniel arrived, Emily felt a flutter of emotion, the familiar warmth and ease settling over her like a gentle blanket, and she introduced them, watching closely as Lucas extended a polite but reserved hand, and Daniel responded with his characteristic calm kindness, the air between them charged with unspoken understanding, respect, and curiosity, and Emily sensed that both men were navigating the moment carefully, aware of its significance, yet willing to trust her guidance and openness. As dinner progressed, conversation flowed, sometimes lightly, with jokes and observations about the season, the town, and shared memories, and sometimes more deeply, touching on loss, healing, and the tentative steps one takes when opening a heart again. And Emily noticed Lucas observing Daniel closely, reading the subtle expressions, the gentle attentiveness, and realized that her son was both protective and approving, quietly acknowledging that the connection she was exploring was genuine, sincere, and respectful. After the meal, they lingered at the table, the candles casting a soft glow over their faces, and Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, knowing she needed to speak honestly to Lucas, to acknowledge both the discomfort and the love behind his earlier actions, and she said softly, "I was angry at first. You stepped into a space that wasn't yours," and Lucas looked down, bracing for criticism, the tension in his shoulders betraying his worry, but Emily continued, her voice gentle yet firm, "But you reminded me that my life didn't end with grief. You reminded me that love is possible again, even when it feels dangerous." And Lucas's eyes lifted, filled with relief and a mixture of pride and humility, understanding that his intention had been received as love, not interference, and that the boundary he feared he had crossed had actually opened a path toward healing and connection. She turned to Daniel, her expression softening, her heart full of cautious hope, and said, "And you reminded me that love doesn't fade. It waits. It waits for the right moment, for patience, for hearts ready to open again." And Daniel's gaze met hers, steady, warm, and encouraging, conveying understanding, respect, and the quiet joy of seeing someone brave enough to accept love again. Lucas watched silently, absorbing every word, understanding that his mother's choice to embrace this new connection was not a rejection of him, but a testament to his care, a reflection of the line he had crossed out of love, and he felt a mixture of pride and tenderness, realizing that his actions, though bold, had been part of something beautiful and transformative, shaping the emotional landscape of their home in a way he had never imagined possible. Emily reached for Lucas's hand, a small but significant gesture of connection and gratitude, saying gently, "You crossed a line, yes, but you also opened a door I was too afraid to touch." And Lucas's eyes glistened with emotion, feeling the validation, love, and trust in her words, understanding that boundaries had been respected, love had been nurtured, and family had grown stronger through honesty, courage, and vulnerability. As the evening progressed, the three of them shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments, the tension dissolving into comfort, warmth, and subtle joy, and Emily noticed how naturally the space between them shifted, from cautious curiosity to genuine connection, from fear of discomfort to shared understanding, realizing that this night marked a turning point not only in her romantic life but in the emotional bond she shared with her son and the trust she had rebuilt with him. Later, as Lucas cleared the table with her guidance, he reflected on how his boldness, his willingness to risk discomfort for her sake, had brought about this moment of harmony, and he felt a deep, steady pride, knowing that he had acted from love, not selfishness, and that Emily's happiness was blooming in part because of his care and courage, a realization that filled him with both relief and quiet joy. Emily, meanwhile, sat quietly, feeling the warmth of the room, the subtle heartbeat of new love in her chest, the gentle presence of a man who respected her, the unwavering support of a son who loved her fiercely, and she understood, with surprising clarity, that life had shifted, that the quiet house she had known for years was now alive with laughter, connection, and the delicate thrill of possibility, that love could be gentle and profound, and that her heart could grow in ways she had feared it never would. The night ended with soft goodbyes, the candles extinguished, and Emily standing by the window again, watching the stars emerge, her heart full, her mind alive with hope, and she realized that the surprise she had feared, the crossing of a line by someone she loved, had actually been the catalyst for transformation, bringing romance, trust, and family together in a way she had not expected, leaving her with the comforting knowledge that love, in its many forms, had found a way back into her life, quietly, gracefully, and profoundly, changing everything for the better.